over there, yes. And those of us who were preparing for this service today have already gotten to meet him. I will tell you how I heard about Scott. My dear friend and still my massage therapist, Sherry Phillips, and I know she lives in California, but she comes back about every 6 to 8 weeks. And I say, when you're on your way, please text me so I can get on your roster. Because you all know how powerful of a healer Sherry Phillips is. Well, she had told me about Scott, but you know how people tell you about things and it falls out of your head. It's like, okay. But then I believe that she reached out to me, and then Scott reached out to me and said, I really want to come to Nashville. And he wanted to do a writer's workshop, which I hope some of you were able to go through yesterday. I know some of you, I see you nodding your heads. Unfortunately, Judy and I both had commitments, or I would have been here because I have started listening to an audiobook of his, and it's transformational. So I want to just say a few words, but I want to give him the stage because he is going to make an impact on your heart today on some level. I know he is. On his website, and even in the audiobook, it talks about that about 15 years ago, a friend asked him what he wanted to do with his life. You ever had somebody ask you that? And how do you answer such a question? And he said he wanted to spread as much love as possible. Wow. That's just amazing to me to think that there is an individual on this planet that's their purpose, to spread as much love as possible. So I want to tell you that even in meeting him for the first time this morning, he's already done that for me and with his amazing partner. And he's done that with lots and lots of our congregation already. So if you want to become a love spreader, sit up and pay attention. Scott Stabile.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Denise, for that beautiful intro. I feel overwhelmed already by what's gone on here. I've already gone through every emotion possible, so thank you. This is a really beautiful community, and I felt it from the moment Gordon and I arrived today. Does it sound okay?
I think it's come off you.
It's what?
It's off your ear.
Oh, it's okay. It's very light, so how's that?
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you. Yeah, I felt it in just everyone I met here. There's such an openness and such a warmth, and I was talking to Denise about it. I'm not a regular churchgoer myself, but I've had several experiences with unity churches across the country, and there's something very different that happens with unity churches. Something that to me feels like love, like real love and real openness and a true invitation to be who you are and to celebrate your experience with God, your experience with love as you see fit. And this place rocks. Seriously. So thank you all. I know you've been doing some work around Louise Hay and the idea of you can heal your life. And today I wanted to talk about self-care as a way of healing your life. And when we talk about self-care, the first and foremost thing I think about is self-love. And I'm going to end this talk on self-love, but essentially when I'm speaking about self-care, I'm just talking about how do we take care of ourselves? You know, what choices are we making that actually feed our souls, that actually add more peace, more meaning, more joy to our lives? And what choices are we eliminating that don't? And everything for me, as I've moved through my life and have committed myself to love as the guiding force in my life, understanding, as you all said, that love is our most powerful healer. And that when we're settled into the energy of love, we can trust without a doubt that what we have to offer ourselves, our friends, and the world in general is powerful. beyond anything we can even wrap our heads around. It is our greatest healer. So it's got to start with us, right? Self-love is an indication, or self-care rather, is an indication of self-love, of your love for yourself. So I want to tell you all a few stories about self-care, approaching it from a few different angles. And I'm going to start by telling you an experience I had with green tea. And even though we're in church, and this is probably a highly inappropriate story after seeing you all for the first 15 minutes,
It's all okay.
It's totally not inappropriate. We've already talked about vibrating our energy, so I'm going to talk to you about green tea, and I'm going to tell you a little story about my underwear. So many years ago, I was a big green tea drinker. I was drinking it every day. And I don't know, are there any green tea drinkers in the room? Okay, so you probably know that green tea is a very sensitive tea. It can't steep for very long. And if you steep it for too long, like beyond 2.5, 3 minutes, it starts to taste very bitter. Very bitter. It's nasty. I like to think of like 5 to 6 minute green tea as like cat urine, basically. It's not what you want to be tasting. So as it was, I would make green tea every day. I'd have the tea bag, I'd pour the hot water, and then I'd leave the room, and I'd be like, oh no, the tea, and I'd come running back frantically into the kitchen, knowing that like 6 or 7 minutes had passed, and I've done myself a disaster again. But I was at the time, I'd have the cup of tea, I'd taste it was disgusting. I'd still drink it, probably out of laziness or not wanting to waste the tea bag or whatever we tell ourselves. And so probably 60, 70% of the time, I'm drinking really nasty green tea. And then 30% of the time I remember to get there and do it. So hold on to that story. Hold on to a man who's drinking really nasty green tea. And then one day there's this epiphany that you probably all realized already. It's like, you can time your tea. It's not that complicated. This is what people have been doing this for millennia. And my phone was always sitting right there next to my cup of tea. But I wouldn't take those 8 to 10 extra seconds to just set the timer for 1:45, which is my perfect steeping time. And finally I woke up and I started timing my tea. And every day my ducks would quack on my alarm, and every day I would pull the tea bag out, the quacking duck alarm, and I would drink a perfect cup of tea. So day after day after day, I was having this beautiful cup of green tea, how it's meant to be had. And it became habit. It became self-care as habit. And now, years later, I drink probably more coffee or other types of teas than I do drink green tea. But anytime I make a cup of green tea, I go right for the phone and I time it and have a perfect cup of green tea. It's built into my ritual. So there's that story. Now let's jump to my underwear. They're connected. So, church, baby, church. So I was sitting in my apartment a few years ago, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table, and I'm writing on my computer for a couple hours. And over the course of this couple hours, as I'm sitting and writing, I'm also shifting in my chair and thinking, these underwear are so uncomfortable writing. They're writing. Why are they writing like this? Typing. It's like, I hate these underwear. I hate these underwear. And all of this dialogue is going on as I'm trying to get some work done. And it took me about 2 hours of this. And then the light bulb went off again. It's like, Scott, take off the underwear. Get rid of them. You don't have to wear this pair of underwear on your body. So before I go on, I have an important question, and you are in church, so you have to answer honestly. How many of you have ever worn uncomfortable underwear? That's everyone, basically. How many of you are wearing uncomfortable underwear right now? Nobody? All right. I'll trust her being honest. But, so I didn't just take them off in that moment. Because I'm melodramatic, as my partner would attest to, I grabbed scissors, because I was angry at these underwear. So I sliced them up and threw them in the trash. I went right over to my underwear drawer, pulled it out, and really with precision of a surgeon was like, you know, took those underwear and threw them away. Because it's insane. We it's insane. I tell this story in my book, and there's some very heavy stories in the book, and this story is obviously a bit lighter. And of everything I tell, and I'm like pouring my heart out in this book, the one thing that people come up to me about the most is like, I love the underwear story. That's the thing I connected to the most in your book. Because we can all relate. You know, we're all making choices like that. We're all wearing uncomfortable underwear. We're all forgetting to time our tea and drinking these nasty cups of tea. We're all doing things that ultimately do not reflect self-care. And it seems really insignificant. Like, okay, you're not timing your tea, you're drinking bitter tea. Okay, you're wearing uncomfortable underwear. Everyone wears uncomfortable underwear. But I'm here to tell you those choices are not insignificant at all. They're actually profoundly significant, because every time I chose to drink a nasty cup of green tea, the message that I am saying to God, the message that I am saying to myself, is that I do not matter enough to take care of myself in the most basic way. The deeper message, of course, is I don't love myself enough to take care of myself in this way. Every minute I sat or walked through the world in uncomfortable underwear is a minute of self-abuse. And that's not hyperbole, even though it sounds like it. If I can't look after myself in this most basic way, I can assure you that the bigger choices I'm making in my life, the more important choices, are also reflecting my lack of self-care and my lack of self-love. It starts with tea, and it starts with underwear, and it leads into everything we're doing in our lives. Now, the beautiful thing about self-care is that it's all about choice, right? When we start to pay more attention to how we're looking after ourselves in the choices that we're making each day, it becomes like blatantly clear. This feels good. This choice lifts me up. You know, this choice reflects love for myself. So I'm going to do more of that choice. You know, I'm going to make more choices like that. And as you become more aware of those choices that lift you up, you also very naturally become aware of the choices you're making in your life that don't serve you, that deplete you, that pull you down. You know, and you build the habit of doing what feels good more, what brings more meaning into your life, doing that more often, and you build the habit of eliminating those choices that don't lift you up and don't serve you. This is self-care. This is self-love. And one of the things for me in life that gives me the most hope is that our power lives in choice, and that at any moment is a new opportunity to make new choices for ourselves. It doesn't matter if you spent 30 years wearing uncomfortable underwear, right? You know, right. That sounds like an acknowledgement. You know, because right now is right now. It doesn't matter if you spent 20 years making bad choices in one area of your life. Hello, I forgot about you over there, Judy. I'm sorry. Hello. You know, it doesn't matter if that's how you've lived for the past 20 years. Right now is right now, and all possibility lives in right now. All possibility lives in this moment, in each new moment moving forward. So it's never too late to pay attention to how you're taking care of yourself. It's never too late to start taking care of yourself in a better way. And paying attention to how it feels once you do. This is how we change our lives, because every single second of self-care is a reflection of self-love. And every single second of self-love is love, period, right? And people, nice people, like the people in this room, we tend to view self-love as selfish. And so we're like, I'm not going to take care of myself because that's selfish. There's nothing more powerful you can do for yourself, for your family, for your friends, and for our world than love yourself first and foremost. Because when you are loving yourself first and foremost, you are always going to have more to give to the people in your life, right? When you take care of yourself and you're getting enough rest, you show up in a completely different way for your family and friends. When you're feeding yourself healthy foods, you show up for a completely different way for your family and friends. Right? This is common sense. This is I call 1 + 1 = 2 spirituality. Super, super basic. I believe we intuitively know what we need to do to take care of ourselves. It's not about knowing. If we pay attention, if we ask ourselves, it's not about knowing, it's about actually taking action. Following up that knowing with tangible, concrete action. I want to say something else about self-care. I want to talk about boundaries for a second. Because nice people, I'm gonna ask you a question. How many of you in this room are really good at making strong boundaries with the people in your life? Okay. Let the record show there are about 5 hands out of a room of dozens. I don't know how many people are here. Nice people are terrible with boundaries because we feel like we're being difficult or prima donnas or whatever it is we tell ourselves we're doing by being clear. It's nonsense. There is nothing as respectful as creating boundaries in your life. Respectful not just for yourself, but for all people involved. Because when I'm clear with my boundaries, basically what I'm saying is, this is what works for me, and this is what doesn't. And I don't believe that most of us want to be trampling all over each other's boundaries. I believe that we don't know what each other's boundaries are because nobody's saying them clearly, right?
Right.
It's like you don't want to be walking all over people. It's a blessing when someone's like, this works for me and this doesn't, and then it's like, wonderful, then I know how to engage with this person. And for me, when I'm saying this is what works for me and this is what doesn't, it also allows me to tune into the people who are wanting to trample all over your boundaries because they're out there too, you know? And then it's incumbent upon us to turn the mirror inward. And if you're engaged in relationship with people, once you've stated your boundaries clearly, who are committed to walking all over them, then it's important to ask yourself, why am I choosing to be in a relationship with people who are choosing to trample all over my boundaries, right? Because self-care is certainly about who we are choosing to spend our time with. Who are we choosing to put our energy into? This, by the way, having just been here for a day, I can assure you all this is a great self-care choice. Coming to this service on Sunday and soaking in the crazy, wonderful magic that's going on here. Keep doing that, you know. But these things we've got to pay attention to, right? And a lot of the time, what happens for what keeps us from making these smart choices, these caring choices, these loving choices for ourselves is fear. You know, fear is at the root of all the insanity, all the things our minds tell us. And I want to tell a little story about fear in the context of taking care of yourself. So Gordon and I were living in Panama for a few years, and at the time we had a good friend of ours coming to visit, and she was coming to visit us in Panama, and from Panama was going to move on to Costa Rica to visit some other friends. Now this friend has a lot of anxiety, you know, struggles with anxiety in her life, and struggles specifically with anxiety around health. So she was coming to Panama and Costa Rica, and Panama and Costa Rica both have dengue fever, which is this mosquito-borne illness. And it's an ugly one. We never had it when we were there, but people get it, it's ugly. You usually don't die, but you go through a lot of misery for a long time. And she was understandably concerned about it, but worked herself into a fit around getting bitten by a mosquito when she came to visit and getting dengue fever. So she warned me on the eve of her visit. She said, listen, I want you to know that I'm bringing a lot of mosquito preparations. And I know my friend, so nothing was going to surprise me, or so I thought. But she arrives and she says, okay, I want to show you what I've brought to you. So she opens her suitcase, and all of her clothing in the suitcase, and the suitcase itself had been sprayed with a special repellent material. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then she pulls out a couple of her own repellent sprays. Okay, that's fine. And then she pulls out garlic capsules. And then she brought her own bowl of garlic. So she brought an actual garlic bowl. And then she brought other supplements that were supposed to deter mosquito bites. And then she brought these bracelets that were mosquito repellents. And then she brought a necklace that was a mosquito repellent. I'm not kidding. And the truth is, I'm forgetting some of the things. I know I am. And then she brought this fan repellent that sprays, and then the fan twirls, and then it reminded me of it reminded me of Pigpen in the Peanuts cartoon. He's always walking in this cloud of filth. So it's like spraying repellent, so you're moving through the world in like a cloud of repellent. Which I'm more of like a germaphobe, chemical phobe, if that's something. So this was everything all lined up. And then she pulled out a full beekeeper uniform. Head to toe, full helmet cover with like the little mesh around for the mouth. And so the next day, she and I go take a hike in the rainforest about an hour outside of Panama City. Now, Panama, I should tell you for a little background, is 90 degrees on a good day and 95% humidity. It is a sweat box. You walk out and without moving, you're dripping in sweat. Think of like the worst summer days here. That's Panama almost every day of the year. So I'm thinking, my friend's gonna drop over. She's gonna have heat stroke, but she's not gonna survive this hike. But we're walking and she's literally like lifting the thing to take in air. She's in full layers, all of her accoutrements. She's like, this is what she's doing. We arrive at the rainforest and we check in and pay to enter. And my friend's asking the woman, do other people come like this? And the sweet woman behind the counter is just eyes wide. And she's like, no. And then as we're walking away, we notice this woman like sneaking out to take a picture of my friend. And who is it? Like this crazy gringa who's like walking through the rainforest. So we're walking, we have a great day, we're laughing about it, and then we come back to my apartment later, and my friend was feeling a lot of embarrassment. And she was actually feeling a lot of shame. Like, this is what it takes for me to do this. I had to go to this extreme just to come to Panama and take an hour or 2 hour walk through the rainforest. She felt silly and ridiculous and shameful. And I had a very, very different read on this experience. For me, what she did is like executive level self-care. This is platinum level. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't get braver than this, because 98% of human beings who carried that amount of anxiety inside of them would never have gone to Panama and Costa Rica. They would have said no. Their fear would have been so powerful that their choice would have been dictated by that fear. And what my friend did was she made a very different choice. She said, this is what I want to do. I'm terrified, and how can I take care of myself as much as possible? How can I make myself as comfortable as possible within an uncomfortable reality? And for me, that was such a beautiful lesson, because I feel like that's something we can always be considering. Knowing that anytime we're making big changes in our lives, on any level, we are going to be assaulted by fear. Fear of change, fear of failure, fear of all the unknowns that come with making big changes, right? They always present themselves. And if you're like me, throughout my life so often when those fears have hit, I've gone to just no, or I'll just do it another time when I don't feel less afraid, but I never get to that other time when I don't feel less afraid. And then I don't do those things, all those different things that I felt in my heart I needed to do for myself. So knowing that changes are going to be uncomfortable, we can always be looking at, how can I make it as comfortable as possible? And once we do that, once we give energy to the idea of comfort within the reality of discomfort, it helps us to move forward in a more courageous way. It starts a very different conversation that takes us farther away from the no, I'm too afraid, and closer to the, okay, I can do this. And the other thing to remember, and the other way to take care of ourselves within the context of change, is to understand that when we're thinking about doing something new in our lives, we're imagining the whole thing, even though we're only at step A. We need to get to step Z, we're at step A, and we're picturing everything that goes on in between. And if you're like me, you get paralyzed often. And that's the other thing that keeps us from moving forward. It's too much. You can't do it all. But the thing is, you don't have to do it all, right? And we serve ourselves, we take care of ourselves by deconstructing the change, deconstructing the situation, and recognizing I'm only at A. The only place I have to get to is B. And getting from A to B might be sending out a single email. It might be making a single phone call. It might be going to the arts and crafts store and buying a packet of colored pencils or paints or a canvas. It might be going down to the library and doing a bit of research. The point is, A to B is much more palatable. And once you're at B, you still don't have to get to Z. Sure, you can have it you can have an outline, you can know where you need to go, but B is just to C. C is just to D, and then suddenly you're going to find yourself at R and at S and at T and W, and that Z that was so scary and so overwhelming, that created so much paralysis in your life, it's like it's right there, This is how we take care of ourselves. This is how we keep ourselves moving forward with our fear, by the way, because our fear always comes along for the ride. The fear's not going anywhere. So please, a part of self-care is by not making your fear an enemy. You create enemies inside of yourself, you create wars inside of yourselves, they just create more wars. If you go to battle with your mind, you will lose the battle. You know, recognize that our mind is there doing its job, our fear is there doing its job, which, by the way, is to protect us. It just doesn't do a very good job. You know, our fear is an idiot, basically, a lot of the time. It wants to protect you from running into traffic, that's good. It also wants to protect you from, like, asking the barista out for a date. You know, if fear just goes like, panic, don't do it, failure, rejection, death. You know, so it doesn't have a lot of emotional intelligence, is what I'm saying. So it's incumbent upon us to bring our emotional intelligence to the fear, not create an enemy. It doesn't have to be a bully. It can just be, as I talk about, it's like a little brother or sister just nagging on your pant leg. And you can be like, okay, I hear you. You know, okay, I know you're just doing your job, and I'm going to move forward courageously with my fear. You know? And thank you. Gordon just gave me the 5-minute signal.
Where was that at?
The last thing I want to talk about in the context of self-care is what I spoke about in the beginning, which is self-love. So I'm a big fan of love. It's like, for me, the best thing we have going on this planet, also the most powerful thing we have going on this planet. And when I speak about love, I'm speaking about everything that love informs in our lives, like kindness and compassion and forgiveness and authenticity. You know, all of these beautiful gifts of love. So when we're operating in the energy of love, we have a much better chance of operating as a kind, compassionate, loving, forgiving human being. And I want y'all to know, like, I'm not some Buddha who's like, I'm definitely not some Buddha who's always loving. You know, I fell off the love. I'll bring Goran up here to speak. He'll tell you some stories. Goran always says to me, I've grown a fairly large Facebook community. I do a lot of live talks. And Goran, who is Eastern European, so whenever I do his voice, I can't help but do it in the way I'm about to do it. But Goran will say to me, I'm going to go on your Facebook page and tell them what you really like. So if you want to know what I'm really like, feel free to pull Goran aside. But the thing about love for me is that what I'm trying to say is I'm all about love because love feels good. If love didn't feel so good, if it didn't feel so good and so right to be operating out of the energy of love, I assure you I wouldn't be such a big fan of it. I wouldn't be making so much noise about it. I wouldn't be up here talking to you about it. But we know this. We know how good love feels, which is why it's so hard sometimes to wrap your mind around this crazy planet we live in and all of the justifications that we humans make to stray from love, to operate outside of love, to judge and condemn each other, to hate each other, to divide one another. It doesn't make any sense because we all have been on the receiving end of love and we all have been on the giving end of love, and we know it's the purest, truest, most beautiful thing that's going. Right?
Amen.
Yes.
And it has to start with yourself. You know, the Buddha has one of my favorite quotes. It's, if you truly loved yourself, you could never hurt another. And that speaks to me so deeply because I understand that when I am rooted in my love, all I have to give the world is my love, right? When we are so connected to love of ourselves, all we have to show up with is love of other people. And that's why self-love is so important. It's the starting point for everything. You know, so if you leave here and I say no other thing to you that resonates, please allow these words to resonate, which is just love yourself as deeply as possible, as madly as possible, knowing that by doing so, you are serving our entire world, you first and foremost, and our entire world in a deep and beautiful way. You know, this is the gift that we can give to ourselves and to each other. This is the foundation of self-care. This, I believe, is ultimately the way we heal our lives, right? And the more of us who are out there making noise for love and who are working on our growth and our healing, this then becomes the way we heal our planet, right? We need more people. We need more of us out there making as much noise as possible for love. Not falling in line with the division and the vitriol. If you're going to choose to show up for those conversations, teach people how to show up with empathy. Teach people how to show up with compassion. Teach people how to show up with kindness. It's too easy to say, I will never discuss politics because politics are too divisive. That may be, but you don't have to discuss politics in a divisive way. You can show a different way. You can lead in a different way so that everyone out there sees, wait a minute, it is possible to talk about the things going on in our country, in our world, and to talk about them with kindness and compassion. And to know that when we do so, that's when we create connection with people. That's when we actually foster dialogue instead of screaming fits where no one is listening. This is how we take care of ourselves. So I will leave you with that. I want to, again, just thank you all. You all are really beautiful. It's an overwhelming feeling. As I was coming onto the stage, I felt empty in my mind because I was so moved by that last song and so moved by everything that had come before it. That I just thank you so much for receiving me with such grace and with such love and for taking care of each other in this beautiful way. And really, God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you.